Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and to help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we're having a timely conversation on voting and voting systems with Daniel Griffith, Senior Director of Policy with Secure Democracy USA. As the name implies, Secure Democracy USA works to protect voting rights and opposes efforts to suppress votes. That's important work, but the most important work right now is to reassure voters that your vote matters and that your vote will count. We can't let the noise surrounding the election discourage voters, and Texans of faith and Texas faith leaders can play a key role in cutting through the noise and encouraging our communities to take our civic responsibility seriously. Spoiler, Texas Impact has tools for you to do just that. Check out all of our civic engagement resources and so much more on our website at texasimpact.org, especially those resources on the Texas Faith Votes page. We make it easy for you and your congregation to do this work together. If you have questions about any of it, please shoot me an email. It's scott@texasimpact.org. We're happy to help, but you're the ones with the local connections, so we look forward to supporting your efforts and cheering you on. I know many of you are already doing that work. We see you and we appreciate you. If you're not yet on that list, no worries. We still love you, and it's not too late to get started. Check out the resources and let us know if you need any help getting started. Y'all, this is an important season, and we need everyone doing all we can to encourage civic participation during this historic season. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Daniel Griffith. Joining us for today's conversation is Daniel Griffith, Senior Director of Policy with Secure Democracy USA. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I assume you all are very busy these days, so I really do appreciate you taking the time. Daniel, before we jump in, talk to us about Secure Democracy USA. For our listeners who aren't familiar, talk to us about your organization.
Yes, Scott. So Secure Democracy USA is a nonpartisan 501c4 nonprofit organization that works to improve election access and integrity across the United States. We educate policymakers and the public about what it takes to safeguard our voting system and collaborate with state leaders, election administrators, election integrity experts, and allies to ensure that all eligible citizens have the freedom to vote how they choose. Now, our core work is in state legislative advocacy. We're involved in actually, going down to the Capitol in the states that we work in, which is about 14, including Texas, and, talking with the legislators there to, let them know, one, from an educational side, what we've observed that works and doesn't work, in the various states and how they might be able to improve their own state election systems, based on our research and, the ideas we've been able to formulate regarding what might look like, the best possible election administration system.
Speaking of the best possible election administration systems, before we get into things that could potentially go wrong or things that are going wrong, our listeners are primarily people of faith, so we are aspirational people. So before we get into what's wrong, talk to us about what an ideal voting system would look like in the United States.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the ability to, kind of speak in those aspirational terms. I don't always get to have that chance in some of the work that I do. But,
right.
Certainly as Secure Democracy USA, we believe that the ideal system is one that really balances access, transparency, and security. I think we find that, whether we're talking with lawmakers, whether we're talking with organizations that are really involved in the, election legislation process, you see a real focus on maybe one of those aspects without really considering what the balance of those should look like. But we really come from a place where we're really trying to provide the best possible balance between all three of those particular components of the election administration process. One main focus for us is that voters should have the ability to choose the method in which they want to vote. And that could be one of three ways. That could be going to vote in person on election day. That can be going to vote early in person before Election Day, which, of course, is a very popular method in Texas. And it could be allowing any person to cast their ballot by a secure mail ballot, as well. So, we do work in all our states to, try to enact policies that provide that kind of freedom. We would, try to work with election officials, both at the local and the state level, to really incorporate the benefits of technology. If you think about any other industry, it's always a situation where, industries are really striving to take advantage of the latest in technology to give the advantages to those who participate in that market to have all the advantages that technology offer. And we want to be able to do the same thing in the election space. Thinking of Texas as a state that is such an industry, an international industry leader in a lot of technology industries, we would certainly be looking to do that in Texas as well, with really an eye towards a system that, has the lowest possible cost of entry for every eligible voter, while making sure that there are sufficient safeguards in place so that no one who is ineligible is participating in the process.
Yeah, it is crazy that I could buy a house online without having to go into a storefront or something to make that happen. But we have to go in person to register to vote and vote and all those things. Is there anybody who's using technology in voting well in a way that is safe and secure?
Oh, well, certainly. If you think about Texas, Texas is one of only 6 states now that currently doesn't allow every eligible voter to use an online system to initially register to vote, as well as to update their voter registration. And there's certainly, if you look at the company that Texas is keeping in, with respect to not providing online voter registration, it's by far the largest state. And you would think, given the population of the state, given the geographical diversity of the state, 254 counties that you have to worry about, trying to keep up to date, as well as knowing what we know about Texas in terms of, folks move around a lot, move within the state, move in and out of the state. So, certainly from our point of view, that's one aspect of technology that will benefit, these calls that we're hearing to make sure that voter rolls are kept clean and up to date, really giving voters the ability to, assist election officials in terms of performing that chore.
All right, shifting topics a little bit. I know I want to get into some of the specific things that are happening here in Texas, but over the course of the last couple of legislative sessions, Texas Impact and listeners of this program have heard a lot about voter suppression efforts here in Texas. And I know that because of all that and because of the news that's going on, we do have anxious listeners. So I feel like we need a moment here at the top to just tell people it's going to be okay, that our systems are going to hold. What should people do, or what should people know to help ease that anxiety as we move into election season?
Yeah, I appreciate that, approach as we're, getting within now, 2 months of the election, that everything really is going to be okay. That's certainly a message that we think accurately trying to provide to, all of our partners in all the states that we work, and through some of our educational work through all 50 states that will be conducting their elections in November. Texas really shares a lot in common with a lot of states in that, that election administration process where, the voter shows up to vote, they get their ID checked, put their ballot, in the tabulator, and then the process of transporting it, counting it, the county, officials canvassing, and then certifying the winners. There are a lot of checks and balances in that process. There are a lot of different eyes who are going to be involved in that process. There are a lot of eyes from both parties. They're going to be involved in that process, whether they're election workers, whether they're election observers. People can feel comfortable that there, are a lot of folks who are making sure that, all those processes are being followed. So, everything is counted accurately and the will of the people is accurately reflected in the results. When you go to your polling place, there are a lot of volunteers there. Again, they're volunteers from both parties who are really eager to make sure that your ballot counts the way that you intend for it to do and want to guide you through the process. I've worked as a election worker, a poll worker at the polls. I've been a poll watcher. I've been behind the scenes. And what I find in all those experiences is that everybody who's there wants to be able to help everyone who's eligible to make sure they were able to cast their vote, whatever, we need to do to make that happen. And I think people can rest assured that that will be their experience when they go to the polling place. Even thinking about something like casting your ballot by mail. If you look at some things that Texas has done recently, there was the big piece of legislation that was passed in 2021, SB 1, which had some provisions that folks may not necessarily be excited about, but there were definitely some things in there as well that we worked with legislators to make sure it was in there and to make sure that was going to provide an outlet for voters to make sure that their ballots are counted correctly. One thing that was part of that has since been even refined additionally from some legislation in 2023 is the notion of cure when it comes to mail ballots, which is a process that, if officials look at a ballot that's cast by mail and they have some concerns about maybe the signature doesn't look right, or maybe some of the other information maybe just isn't exactly perfect, maybe a number was transcribed or something. Now, unlike 2020, now election officials have to reach out to contact that mail ballot voter to say, hey, we've got an issue here. Here's a way that you can fix that to make sure that your ballot's counted. So that's even a new process from 2020 that wasn't in place. That's going to give, those folks who need to have the convenience of voting by mail to make sure that they do have their ballots counted.
I know that people are paying attention to this issue and the set of issues just based on my social media feed, which might be biased. But talk to us about the governor's recent announcement. I know this got a lot of attention on my social media feed, but that announcement that they'd removed 1 million people from the voter rolls, was that general list maintenance, or is this something to be concerned about?
Well, at least the information that's been publicly released on that so far makes it a bit too early to tell whether this is something beyond what might be considered generalist maintenance. Looking, for example, at the Secretary of State's website, there is a way to go in there and look at monthly activity in each county around how many voter registrations being canceled and for what reason. And certainly, preliminary look at those numbers over the past several years, which is what the governor seemed to be referring to, seem to add up to the numbers that the governor is talking about. So it could very well be generalist maintenance. Now, one thing to note in this conversation is, we're having this discussion within 90 days of a federal election. So, no counties, the state, no one should be doing general list maintenance right now because federal law prohibits that within 90 days of a federal election. They want to make sure that there is a space in there that no one's registration status is really being affected in a way that's going to prevent them from voting in the upcoming election. So, given the governor's announcement, and while we kind of continue to suss out, whether this is just typical list maintenance practice, in a state with, 18 million registered voters or not, the advice that I would have for listeners would be to check their voter registration now. Call up your local county or, otherwise make sure that you're registered and that you're registered at the right address. If you're not registered at the right address, even if you're registered in the right county, you're going to run into potential issues of not being able to cast a ballot in certain races that may be very important to you. So, you want to make sure that you are registered and that your address shows correctly. And then probably to be on the safe side, you probably want to do it again before October the 7th, which many folks may know will be the last day that you can register or update your registration prior to the November election. So you just want to make sure that you have everything all set and ready to go, before that date so that when, November rolls around or late October, if you're going to early vote, you'll have everything where it needs to be.
And that's everybody, right? I checked mine this last weekend just to make sure. So everybody, don't assume this is somebody else's homework assignment. This is for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Another thing that that folks have been asking about, and I know will likely be in the news, these county audits. Talk to us about what we should know about those as we see them in the headlines.
Well, Post-election audits is nothing new nationally, although they're a bit new as far as the concept goes in Texas. Now, certainly, a lot of these came about as a result of some legislation that was passed after the 2020 election. And what we've seen so far is, there were 4 counties that were audited, for the 2020 election, and then for the 2022 election, based on the random draw, they audited 3 new counties and then Harris County again as a part of those audits. So it's still, fairly new in terms of kind of what they're concentrating on. But, reviewing the reports that have come out of these audits, it seems like the focus there, at least in terms of what's being done so far, is very security dominant. They're looking into what they perceive might be issues with respect to the integrity of the election or with, compliance with state law around election security, but not really a lot of analysis around access for voters. Certainly, as we mentioned, at the top of the podcast, we probably, I think, in an ideal situation, like to see as much analysis of are we serving all the voters that we need to as we are seeing on the side of are we making sure that no ineligible voters are actually voting. So I think that's something that probably needs to have some continued focus as far as that audit process goes. Interestingly, a type of audit that a lot of states conduct is something known as a risk limiting audit, which is one that can be done fairly early, right after the election returns are all in, even before pre-certification in some states, just to check to make sure that any concerns about how the votes have been tabulated are sufficiently addressed. And Texas was supposed to have a pilot project for risk limiting audits in the counties that was passed as part of the piece of legislation in 2021. We have not heard very much about how that pilot project may be going. So I think that's something that we will be following up on, and others also may want to follow up as well. Kind of an additional step outside of these sort of randomized audits that they're doing, to think about something that might be applicable to all counties to make sure that everything's accurate there.
I appreciate that. Now, we were aspirational at the beginning, but you live and work in this space. I'm curious, what has you most concerned as we move towards Election Day?
Well, certainly for us, we're concerned about how the rhetoric everyone is hearing about elections is going to affect everyone's willingness to participate. You mentioned your social media feed. Everyone has theirs. And there's certainly a lot of noise. It's fair that, those who are hearing that kind of noise, hearing the fear mongering, certainly, seeing some of the things that have happened around elections over the last 4 years might hesitate to want to participate because they don't want to be bothered with all of these issues. So we don't want that kind of rhetoric, that kind of misinformation to be a deterrent for participation. So certainly a lot of the work that we're doing, especially over the last few months heading into the election, is really educational, kind of getting the real facts about election administration processes, especially things like mail voting and the certification process, to sort of, deviate away from these memes or this misinformation that might be online. Trying to kind of move elections back to what they really should be, which is a celebration of our democracy, rather than the way that some folks seem to want to treat them lately, which is more like a crime scene. And I'm borrowing that from a colleague. Thinking about a situation where we really focus on the needs of voters, and maybe to a somewhat lesser extent, the folks who are, the hardworking volunteers and election professionals who run our elections, and kind of get the focus away of where we've seen in the last 4 years, where some people participating in the election administration process seem to really want to focus on their perceived rights of candidates or parties versus the voters. This is an election, and it really should be about serving the voters and making sure the voters are able to see that their voices are heard.
I love that idea of voting or elections being a celebration. And you mentioned earlier that it takes so many people to pull this off, right? Election workers, poll workers, poll monitors, volunteers from across the political and ideological spectrum all coming together to make sure that we are celebrating democracy through this electoral process. So I wonder if you can give some advice to listeners about how they can help this election season.
Absolutely. We mentioned some of the ideas in terms of, things that I've done and things you just mentioned. One thing to do is, kind of in that institutional sense, you could volunteer to be a poll worker. I can pretty much guarantee you that every single county is short of poll workers. So that's something that we can say for Texas and probably every county in the country as far as making sure that there are enough folks to work the polls, checking IDs, making sure ballots are counted out correctly and that sort of thing. Plenty of roles for folks to work at the polling place, which is also a great education. If you happen to be interested in how elections are really run, you can kind of see it, up close, understand all of those checks and balances that we really talked about, being there. So, being a poll worker, or even if you just want to be a poll observer, if you have, you want to work with some folks in your party of preference to kind of make sure that everything's followed, you can certainly do that as well. Beyond those institutional roles, there's also just kind of, the day-to-day work of, being a good friend or being a good neighbor, help a friend or a neighbor who you think might need a little assistance, make a plan to go vote with them or find a way that you can help them out to vote, whether it's, picking the same day to go vote early or picking a time on that Tuesday to go vote together. Again, you can help them check their registration to make sure that they're good to go and you're good to go as well. And then the other way to really get involved, especially in an election, so much about election administration is really local in nature. A lot of it happens at your county commissioner's court. So go to those meetings, listen in. I mean, I can guarantee you that folks who may have some odd ideas about elections, they're going to be at those meetings. So if you would like some cooler heads to kind of prevail and for, your leaders to hear from folks who just want elections to run smoothly and for everyone to have the opportunities that they need, then go to those meetings and have your voice heard as well.
I love all of that. And listeners, I hope you'll take Daniel seriously and do some homework and sign up for all of the places that you can support democracy this election season. Daniel, I know you all are very busy this time of year, and I really do appreciate the time. I wonder if you have any closing thoughts or shameless plugs you'd like to leave with us today.
Oh, I can definitely shamelessly plug several things. So as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, that Secure Democracy USA is a 501c4, which means that we're more advocacy focused. But we do have several 501c3s, which are more educationally focused, that support our work. And they're each working on some things that are important both now in the lead up to the election, as well as to allow folks to kind of follow along, in the legislative process moving forward. So Secure Democracy Foundation, which is one of our 501c3 organizations, in the next few weeks, we'll be putting out a number of documents that will inform voters about some of these things that we're talking about, including a timeline of important dates around elections, a document that explains the entire ballot counting, canvassing, and certification process, and an explainer about the verification process for both mail ballot applications and ballots themselves. So everyone can be aware of all of the checks and balances that are there. We'll have those for Texas as well as 11 other states that folks might be interested in. You can get those at securedemocracyfoundation.org. You can also go to the website for one of the other 501c3s that we're affiliated with, Voting Rights Lab. That's votingrightslab.org. And there you can, for free, sign up for our voting rights legislative tracker. And there, that resource will allow you to track all of the voting rights, election-related legislation in all 50 states, Texas and everywhere else. And it's sortable if you're worried particular about early voting or voter ID or those sorts of things. So you can get a sense of all of the bills that will go through the legislature next year, which normally in Texas, we tend to track somewhere between 200 and 300 just elections related bills. every session. And then also you would have the ability to kind of see what's going on in other states as well to give you a sense of what might be coming.
We love to keep you busy. Sorry about that, I guess. And we love a good legislative tracker. So love all of that. Daniel, thank you so much for the time today. And thanks for your continued work for a better democracy, both in Texas and throughout the United States. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Daniel. Y'all, I love that idea of celebrating democracy, so I hope we all take that framing and encourage our networks to join the party. I hope to see all of our congregations turn into promoters and hubs of joyful engagement as we encourage full participation this election season. I can't wait to hear about your work. As always, Texas Impact has tools for you. I especially hope everyone is using the Texas Faith Votes resources. You can find those and so much more at texasimpact.org. While you're there, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Attinen, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.